Okay, so you know how sometimes you're just like waiting forever at the DMV?
Ugh, tell me about it.
Or like your package is delayed and
Meh.
you're just like, come on already.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going deep on this idea that maybe all these little frustrations
Yeah.
aren't just like random glitches,
Right.
but maybe they're like part of a bigger thing.
Yeah, it's actually super interesting. The source we're looking at today is saying there might be an actual reason for all this public service stuff going downhill.
Spill the tea.
And it all comes back to this concept called neoliberalism.
Neoliberalism.
Okay.
Okay, so for those of us who didn't major in economics,
Right.
how would you explain that, like in normal person terms?
Basically, market knows best.
Okay.
So it's this idea that private companies in competition can solve pretty much any problem way better than the government ever could.
Okay.
And that usually means cutting public spending like big time.
So less government, more private companies, and just let the market work its magic.
Exactly. And the main source we're diving into today, this article called The Neoliberal Assault on Public Services.
Catchy title.
They use the U.S. Postal Service as like the perfect example.
Interesting. Okay, so how does the post office fit into all of this?
Well, the article says what happened to the Postal Service is like a giant warning sign,
Right.
like a case study of how this whole neoliberal thing can really play out.
Gotcha.
And it gets even wilder when they compare it to what could be happening in education.
Okay, hold up. Now you've got my attention.
Good.
I mean, I rely on both mail delivery and a functioning school system, so this is getting a little too real.
Yeah.
So let's break this down. Where do we even begin with all this?
Let's start with the post office. The article really zeroes in on this law from 2006.
Okay.
The Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, or PAEA for short.
PAEA. Got it. So what's the big deal about this law?
Well, basically, the PAEA put this crazy financial burden on the Postal Service.
Okay.
They had to pre-fund retiree health benefits like 75 years in advance.
75 years. That's like unheard of.
Right. No other government agency or private company has to deal with anything like that.
Seriously, 75 years in advance. Like most companies aren't even thinking that far ahead.
Exactly. And this requirement like immediately hit them hard. It basically stopped them from competing fairly and forced them to make these impossible choices.
Like what?
Like choosing between modernizing their equipment and technology,
Right.
or just like keeping the lights on.
So basically they were set up to fail.
That's exactly what the article is saying.
Wow.
So they're saying the PAEA was designed to make the USPS look bad, to make it seem inefficient so they could push for privatization.
So it's like purposely underfunding something just to turn around and be like, see, it doesn't work. Let's give it to private companies.
It's this tactic they call starving the beast.
Starving the beast. Jeez.
So it's not about saving money. It's about weakening public services on purpose.
Right.
So they can justify handing them over to private companies.
And that's messed up.
It's a pretty scary thought, especially when you consider the people who get hurt in the process.
The human cost.
Yeah, like think about it. For decades, a job with the post office was a good job.
Yeah.
Like a solid middle-class career.
Right. You can support a family on that.
Exactly.
Like that was the stable job.
Totally. But this article paints a way different picture of what it's like now.
Oh, no.
Like
Well,
postal workers struggling to pay their bills,
seriously.
low wages, crazy workload, some even living in their cars because they can't afford rent.
That's awful.
It's really sad how much things have changed.
And now they're talking about a nationwide strike.
Yeah, things are getting really tense.
What are the big things pushing them towards a strike?
It's a lot of things piled up, you know? The
Yeah.
low wages are a huge part of it, obviously.
Right.
But the article also talks about, like, terrible working conditions.
Like what?
No air conditioning and the delivery trucks just constantly being pushed to their limit.
It makes you think, like we all get annoyed when a package is late, but we never really stop to think about the person actually delivering it
Yeah.
and what they're going through.
It really makes you question what we value as a society, you know?
Yeah.
Like, are we okay with sacrificing the well-being of the people who keep these essential services running
Right.
just so we can get cheap and fast delivery?
That's a tough question.
It really is.
So zooming out a bit, is this just about the post office or is there something bigger going on?
The article says the post office is just one example,
Okay.
like a tiny piece of a much bigger trend.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying this is classic neoliberalism in action.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that market solutions are the answer to everything.
Even for things like public services.
Yep, healthcare, education,
Yeah.
even the post office.
And they're not alone in seeing this as a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, the article even compared it to like colonialism, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's a really strong comparison.
So are they saying neoliberalism is basically modern-day colonialism?
They're definitely pointing out the similarities in how resources are taken and who benefits.
Okay.
Like they use the example of what happened to Sears and K-Mart.
Oh, yeah.
Loaded up with debt, their assets stripped, and then left to crash and burn.
Oof.
And they're suggesting that could be what happens to public services if we're not careful.
Okay, that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
So we've gone from the post office to colonialism to the downfall of Sears?
Right.
It's not exactly a cheery picture.
No.
Where do we go from here?
Well, the article says what happened to the post office is a warning,
Okay.
like a preview of what could happen to another vital public service, education.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
So how does education fit into all of this? So we just spent like the last half hour talking about the post office, neoliberalism, even colonialism.
Right.
And now we're going to talk about education.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little lost. How does education connect to all this?
Well, think about all the stuff we just talked about. That push for privatization, the idea that the market always knows best, underfunding public services so they look bad.
Right.
The article's saying all those same forces are messing with education, too.
So are they saying our schools are being, like, sabotaged on purpose?
That's a strong word, but they definitely make a good case for it.
Okay, yeah.
Like, look at the similarities between what happened to the post office
Okay.
and what's happening in education now.
Give me an example.
Underfunding and all these unfunded mandates they put on schools.
Okay.
Remember how the post office had to pre-fund those pensions?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of school districts are dealing with the same kind of thing.
Huh.
Never enough money and all these rules that just suck up their resources.
So it's like they're being told to do more with less.
Exactly. Which, like, never works out well.
Yeah, they'll care.
It just leads to burnout and things get worse.
And speaking of burnout, the article makes this direct comparison between postal workers and teachers.
It's crazy how similar their struggles are.
You mean like
Yeah.
low pay, working crazy hours, feeling totally overworked?
Exactly. Teachers are feeling undervalued and unsupported, just like those postal workers.
And that's leading to the whole teacher shortage thing, right?
Big time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't pay people a living wage and you don't give them the support they need,
Yeah,
no surprise they burn out and quit.
totally. It's like you get what you pay for.
Right.
If we want good schools, we got to invest in the people who make them work.
That's a huge point they make in the article.
Yeah.
We can't keep treating education like it's worthless and then expect it to thrive.
Okay, so we've got underfunding, teacher burnout.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
They also talk about how vouchers and charter schools are basically another form of privatization.
Really?
It's like how FedEx and UPS took over parts of the mail system.
So instead of making public schools better,
Yeah.
we're just taking money away from them and giving it to private companies.
That's what the article's saying.
Yeah.
And they say this whole privatization thing often comes with way less accountability.
So who knows what's really going on?
Exactly. And that makes you worry about whether all kids are getting a good education.
It seems like a dangerous path. You know?
Yeah.
What happens to the kids who can't afford those private options?
Right.
Are we creating like a two-tiered education system?
It's a valid concern, and the article really wants us to think about it.
Yeah.
They're not saying all charter schools are bad
Right.
or that vouchers can't ever help,
Okay.
but they're worried about what happens when we put too much faith in the market,
Yeah.
especially for something as important as education.
Okay. So this has been a lot.
Yeah.
My brain's a little fried, but I'm also kind of fired up.
Good.
But the article doesn't just point out the problem, right?
No.
They got to have some ideas about how to fix things, how to avoid falling into this whole neoliberal trap.
They definitely do.
Okay, good. So what's the solution?
First step is just being aware of it, you know? Recognize this pattern, this playbook they're using.
Gotcha.
And then we can start fighting back.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more we understand their tactics,
Right.
the better we can resist them.
Okay. I like that.
And the article is big on advocating for strong public schools.
What does that look like in real life?
It means supporting policies that actually give schools enough money
Okay.
that make sure teachers get paid fairly
Right.
and give them the resources they need to do their jobs well.
So they can actually teach.
Exactly. And it also means pushing back against all these privatization schemes,
Right.
the ones that take money away from public schools and could make education worse for everyone.
It sounds like they want us to change our whole mindset. You know?
Yeah.
Like stop thinking that the market is the answer to everything.
Especially when it comes to something as important as education.
It's funny, we started this whole thing talking about the post office.
Right.
And now we're having this deep conversation about the future of education.
Who knew mail delivery could get so philosophical?
It's all connected, though, right?
Totally.
Like the article does a good job of showing how these things that seem separate are actually linked.
Yeah.
In this case, it's all about this neoliberal way of thinking that puts profits ahead of people.
Makes you wonder if this playbook is being used on the post office and in schools. Where else is it showing up?
That's a great question, and I think that's something we should all be thinking about.
Yeah.
This deep dive has been really helpful for understanding how this ideology works.
Definitely.
And I think it's important to be aware of how it could be affecting other parts of our lives, too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
The decline of the USPS, the parallels with education, the whole neoliberal playbook. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed,
Understandable.
but also kind of empowered.
That's good.
Like, now that we know what we're up against, we can actually do something about it.
Exactly. Awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
And then it's about taking action.
So what are some things people can actually do to protect public education in their communities?
What can we do to make sure every kid has a chance to get a quality education?
All right, so we've gone from like the post office struggling to what could happen to our schools.
Yeah,
It's been a lot.
it has.
But I think the big question everyone's asking is, what can we actually do about all this?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The good news is we're already halfway there.
Really?
Just by knowing about this neoliberal playbook,
Okay.
we can start fighting back.
So it's not like a lost cause.
Not at all. Remember, public services exist because people fought for them?
Yeah.
We can do the same for our schools.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
A call to action. But where do we even start? Like, what can people actually do to support public education?
Well, first things first, get involved.
Okay.
Go to those school board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Join the parent-teacher organizations.
All right.
Talk to your elected officials.
So basically just show up and speak up.
Exactly. The more people who show they care about public schools,
Wow.
the harder it is to ignore them.
What about funding? We talked about how schools are always broke.
Right.
What can we do about that?
Fight for more money. Support those ballot measures that give schools more resources.
Yeah.
Call your representatives. Tell them education funding is important.
It's easy to feel like one person can't make a difference, you know?
I know, but you can.
Yeah.
Especially when you team up with other people who care.
Right.
That's when things really start to change.
So show up, speak out, support funding initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Support teachers.
Yeah.
They're the ones on the front lines.
Right.
Fight for fair pay and benefits for them.
Uh-huh.
And create a culture where they feel valued and respected.
What about that whole privatization thing we talked about? How do we fight back against that?
Learn about vouchers in charter schools.
Boy.
Figure out what they really mean for public education.
Yeah.
And talk about it. Have real conversations about the pros and cons.
So it's not about being against all school choice.
No, it's
And-
about being informed.
Right.
Thinking critically, not just reacting to slogans.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is all great advice for education.
Yeah.
But what about the bigger picture? We started with the post office, remember?
They do.
If this neoliberal playbook is being used everywhere, how do we even begin to tackle that?
I think it all comes back to the same things.
Okay,
Awareness, getting involved, working together.
gotcha.
We got to pay attention, spot the patterns, and fight back.
So it's like connecting the dots, you know?
Exactly.
Realizing that the fight for public education is part of this bigger fight
Yes.
for, like, the soul of our society.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
It's about what we value as a society,
Yeah.
what kind of world we want to live in.
Right.
Do we want everything controlled by the market?
Hmm.
Or do we want a world where everyone has a chance to thrive?
This has been a lot.
It has.
I'm definitely feeling a sense of urgency now,
That's good.
but also hope. We've got work to do, but we can make a difference.
We absolutely can.
So listeners, what are you waiting for?
Right.
Get out there,
Yeah.
make some noise, fight for the future you want.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been real.
It's been eye-opening, for sure.
Definitely.
And remember,
Yeah.
the future isn't something that just happens.
Right.
It's something we create together.